Welcome to the Win Back Your Life Families in Recovery series from SVG and the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation. Today, SVG's Ken Kirschbaumer discusses stigma, shame, and guilt with three-time Olympic gold medalist and Hazelden Betty Ford outreach manager, Carrie Bates.
Let's talk about the stigma, shame, and guilt. How is HBF helping with that? Because obviously that, I'm sure, is a big repercussion of the whole process. And I'm sure that HBF has to have resources and staffers kind of helping people sort through all that stuff. So would you like to start with, are they all three tightly entwined, stigma, shame, and guilt, or are they separate, and are there different issues? So let's start with stigma, because obviously there is some stigma, right? People don't want to go into the program because they feel like they're admitting something that people maybe didn't know, that they think didn't know, but they probably did. And then when they're afraid of coming home and then it being stigmatized as, oh, you had to go, da-da-da-da-da. So walk through stigma, how HBF helps people deal with that issue, either the stigma of one getting treatment and also just, not getting treatment and being seen in recovery.
Yeah. Stigma, shame, and guilt are all very closely related with this disease. Stigma, it's interesting. We still have 23 million Americans struggling and suffering with substance use disorder. And less than 10% of those people are actually seeking help every year. And there's this really, there's a strong misnomer out there that the reason that they're not seeking treatment is really financial. But the reality is the reason that the majority, 90% of people that are suffering with substance use disorder in this country are not seeking help because of stigma. Stigma meaning, we say all these there's all this derogatory language around substance use disorder, right? Like so-and-so had to go to rehab. Well, we need to eliminate. We at Hazelden Betty Ford have started to eliminate and really have started to use and introduce new language surrounding substance use disorder, because language can be shaming and stigmatizing itself, right? We rehab our knees and our elbows. We treat mental health disorders no different than we would any other chronic disease that, by the way, has no cure. This disease is chronic and it has no cure, but it has a solution. And so we have to use language and actions around the disease that doesn't support stigma, right? Because we are not people that are living under bridges. We are your neighbors. We are your kids are probably having play dates at our home with our kids. And we're on the sidelines at soccer games. We aren't the people that live under bridges that you imagine, right? 83% of people that use illicit drugs and drink problematically are employed. So we're just in your communities, right? And so we have to start, and we've come a long ways with stigma, but we do have a long ways to go.
Right. Now, how about as far as shame and guilt, which are a little more internal than stigma?
Right. Shame and guilt, right? Like, I am bad, right? I am a bad human being. That's the way most alcoholics and addicts feel about themselves, right? I remember when I went to treatment and there were a lot of people that were angry with me because I did bad things to the people that loved me the most and that I loved the most. I acted irresponsibly, but I was not an irresponsible person, right? And so the shame and the guilt of who and what we become in active addiction is actually deadly, right? It's actually deadly to feel that level of shame and guilt. When I went to treatment, I remember saying, it doesn't matter how much somebody hates me because nobody's better at hating me than me. And so what I had to learn in recovery, and the gift that all of us get in recovery, is we learn how to put that stick down. Hazelden Betty Ford is teaching people every day how to put the stick down and to stop beating ourselves up for a disease that centers in our brain. It lives in our brain, right? It's no different than any other chronic illness that we might have.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned shame. I mean, the odd thing is any kind of behavior that's sort of untoward, if you will. A lot of ways you can remove the shame is to lean into it even more, right? So
sure,
if you want to normalize your behavior, normalize your drinking, the shame goes away because it's just normal. That's who I am. So that's
right.
the other danger of shame and guilt, clearly.
Correct.
So
And we do a lot of that rationalization while we're out drinking or using, right? We do a lot of rationalization of how much we're drinking and the things that we do. You know, I think that we probably start suffering consequences probably faster than we can lower our own standards, right? Because that's the nature of this disease and the progression and how quickly we can progress through the stages of addiction.
Right. Do you think that these things are changing a little bit as far as, you know, when I look at culturally? It's funny you mentioned rehab, right? So Amy Winehouse, of course, has a song that mentions rehab. And that was, when you look at that whole situation, we all saw it coming and she made fun of it, right? And it was kind of like, ha ha, didn't work out clearly.
Yeah.
But then there's shows like Dope Sick. I just watched Goliath, which was dealing with the opioid crisis. Do you think that those types of programs and cultural moments are going to help with the stigma because people are able to understand that this is not people's fault? A lot of times it is corporations. We won't go into the big picture, but, you know, do you think it's kind of the tone is changing, if you will?
I do think the tone is changing. I think in the last decade, more and more people have come forward with their struggles with substances, and there is a more normal and accepted conversation. I do still believe stigma is still attached. I do believe that that there's negative connotations still to this day. If I introduce myself and say I'm an alcoholic, but if I say I'm a woman living in long-term recovery from substance use disorder, there's language discrepancies on what feels more stigmatized than others.
Right.
I do think that the doing at Hazelden Betty Ford every day to redefine the language around this disease and to really come to people, our patients or people that are considering going to treatment with much less stigmatizing language. Like, you know, we say people relapse, right? Well, relapse has a really negative stigmatizing tone to it. So now we're going to say that you've had a return to use, right? So there's a lot of ways that we're trying to implement less stigmatizing, shaming narratives around this disease, while at the same time, I think that you're starting to see more and more people come forward with their stories and their journeys.
Right. Excellent. Well, thanks, Carrie, so much for your time. Really appreciate it. As always, talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.